Hello, everyone, and welcome to what we hope is not a massively depressing review of the Palace game. but you have myself, Sloth, and you also have Ibi today. Ibi, if you don't know him, is probably Ben Rama's number one fan. So there is probably going to be a bit of Ben Rama propaganda coming into this at some point. But yeah, boys, today wasn't the result we needed. We definitely needed really a win today, and in our next home game, we needed both of those wins really to kind of help us out, but it didn't go to plan. And before we get into the not going to plan, we'll kind of start off where we always start, and we'll start with probably the less contentious part of what we're going to be talking about today. And we'll talk about the lineups. So, not probably much surprise again. Sorry, these bits short. Sorry, we've just completely blocked you out there, but don't worry.
It's all right. It's all right.
But, we started off with probably what we would argue is maybe our strongest 11 in Moyes' eyes. I said in Moyes' eyes, not in all of ours. But obviously we started with Souček in the middle with Rice. Paqueta came back in. But by and large, it's the team that we've seen and expected to see over most of the season. Palace, went with their kind of 4-3-3/4-2-3-1, much like us, with Zaha at the front of the team again. And yeah, so, we went into a game, arguably must win, bearing in mind we are 2 points above the relegation zone. And yeah, we started as we started. At once again, I feel like a broken record, Sloth. I keep saying it every week. There's no pace, no intensity. There is no press, or if there is a press, it is disjointed. When one goes, another does not follow. And we also just sit back, get everyone behind the ball, and allow an away team to come to our patch and play football, because we have zero ambition out of possession to try and force something upon them.
It seriously feels like it takes us conceding major chances, and not just a chance, multiple chances that you will see bite you in the arse at some point in the season. Like, today was rubbish, but if you continue to let side come to your patch and boss possession, get an early goal, because let's face it, at no point in this season have we started a game and gone, we started this really rightly. We've looked rubbish, and second best every single game that I can remember this season, and that's going to bite you in the arse, particularly when teams start to really perform, because they will get one goal and they know they can sit back against you. They know that you're going to take a while to warm up. And it was just the same rubbish play today. I think I mentioned last week against Manchester United that, it's all well and good if someone like Souček is throwing themselves at everything. And, I joined in on the dog pile on him today, but it seems like every single week he is so poor in possession. We can't keep a hold of the ball, and it's like pub football at times, when it's almost as if everyone else has got a different message, but Souček's message is get something on it, be first to it. What you get on it does not matter, because someone confident and composed and skillful, half the time he gets a touch, or half the time he's attempting to do something, he's getting a touch for the sake of getting a touch, and it's marauding off somewhere, it's bouncing off him, it's not taking it down, controlling it, passing it about, it's wasteful possession. And we saw so much of that today. We'll get onto the goals later, but that was another case of possession or attempting to to keep possession for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And it was really disappointing. I think one of my biggest worries is that when we talk about what is our strongest lineup in Moyes' head, there's no regard to form there. And we've got that. It's a recurring theme because we've got this with Southgate. There's no recurring, or there's no justification or meritocracy there. If you are playing and you're performing badly, there doesn't seem to be any pushback. And
well, if your name fits, there's no pushback, as we see it.
I don't want to go that far yet. I think Ibby we've got here, and first up, hello. I've not said that yet. It's a pleasure to have you here. But
thank you very much.
I am beginning to it's making me uncomfortable with the rate that we're seeing people put forward as opposed to picked over performance, and that is my biggest gripe at the moment.
Yeah. So one of the things that I kind of thought, really is, so dysfunctional, it's so disjointed, and one of the things is how can we improve? But maybe before we kind of touch onto that, Ibby, what were your thoughts about the game? Obviously, we had a brief chat beforehand, but it'd be good to kind of hear, all your thoughts when you kind of saw the lineup, how you then saw us set up in those early stages.
I was really happy with the lineup initially when it came out. Obviously, it was good to see Lucas Paqueta back in the starting 11. I was disappointed to see Souček, but I sort of expected it when Downs travelled to Romania in the week. And obviously I'll probably get onto the topic of favouritism and sort of picking who's your pal at training, opposed to who's better for the system and for this apparent possession-based football we're supposed to be playing this season. So I was pretty happy with the lineup, barring Souček, but I'm come to expecting that. I was a bit worried about Tilo Kehrer at right back against Wilfred Zaha, and I sort of got proven right, even though I was angry at him initially for that first goal, which we will discuss potentially. But I thought I was pretty happy with the lineup overall. It's something that we expected. I would like to see Areola continue in goal, so especially that distribution, not coming to the edge of the box and standing with it, and just looking around. And obviously, it might sound like I'm taking digs at players already, but it's just what I've come to be frustrated with in the last sort of 12 to 18 months. So I was pretty happy with the lineup initially. I thought the front four looked really good. And then obviously when the game started, I saw the positioning of a certain number 11 who shouldn't be playing that high, and sort of the ineffectiveness of Jared Bowen as well. That obviously wasn't great, but initially, obviously, I was happy with the lineup, and that's pretty much it with the lineup. To be fair, I thought I was pretty happy with it. And what was your other question? Can you remind me? Sorry about that. Completely.
That's all right. We'll touch on it anyway. We'll keep it quite open, quite loose today, anyway. But one of the things that I think was probably, obviously, when you look at the lineup, it's been great. Moyes is idea probably of his strongest 11 currently, but once again, when you look at our how we kind of, as that team should be setting up, you think that's going to be quite an attacking team. But one thing that we've talked about many times is the fact that there's not much dynamism in the middle. Whilst you have Paqueta and you have Rice, they are at different poles. And again, to get them to link, they're not close enough. As a result of how we set up and how low our block is, we play an incredibly low block at times, which is even more of an embarrassment as to how simple Palace were able to find a pass between, drop a shoulder. One of the things that hurt us was the fact that Zaha kept dropping in as well and coming off of our defenders to make essentially 4 just behind, or just always kind of making sure it was massively overloaded in that middle piece. But again, there was no real excuse for the lack of intent for us to go and press. The likes when Rice would go and press, there was no follow-up from other players. And that included the likes of Scamacca, but also Scamacca, when we had any kind of possession, had essentially about 15 to 20 yards of no players in and around him. and he would get a lazy ball played to him or ball played to the left, to the right, never really kind of in a position where he can go and challenge for it. When they were in a position to challenge, he, by and large, kept the ball, played it off, and did well. But he's also now getting the blame for other people's inaccurate passes, the inability in which to show composure. He's taking the brunt of the blame because the ball keeps coming back. So rather than the passer being the problem, it's the person trying to take control of it. And also sometimes there's nothing to take control of. And I know, Sloth, this is something that you were mentioned, so I've kind of set you up because I know this is something you were talking about earlier. So I've kind of set this up for you right now.
Yeah, I think it's really worrying that we're sat here, we've got so many fans who are saying Scamacca's done this, or is there a worry over him? And it's like, no, there's not a worry over Scamacca. There is a worry about the way we're playing at the moment. And a big part of that was when we look at, there was a chance in the first half where Scamacca carried the ball really well. He was played through. He had 3 Palace defenders around him. Benrahma is the only player who's close to him, giving him a pass. Mm-hmm. And even then, it's a difficult pass to play. It hits the Palace defender. And, it was a poor pass. However, there was no one else on the other side of him. And that's going to lead into my other frustration. I think Bowen has been well off the pace this season. He's very much flattered to deceive. And the first goal was a great example of, I put out quite a positive tweet about Kera, because he is doing a lot of the running up that right-hand side and he's giving us an option. However, it's clear that if you want to play Kera on that side, he needs someone almost to do the remote control work for him and work his brain, because at the moment it's just not engaging. No. And if you put someone like a Guerd in there who's got the pace to cover, you don't need to worry too much about Kera losing the ball because he's got that rock behind him. Then I think the chance, the Palace first goal is pretty much cut out, because someone like a Guerd is not going to go, is going to shout at you to leave it, just to leave that ball, because that's what Kera should have done. The pass from Dawson was terrible, and Kera therefore takes a terrible touch. It's basic, it's schoolboy stuff. It's stuff that I would have done on a Sunday. Like, as a left back, when I used to play there, you take a bad touch and you're almost 9 times out of 10 going to give it straight back to one of their players. Now, the real issue I have with the side is that it looks like the striker is playing a different game. He's playing a completely different game because no one around him is picking up his runs. And I realise what I'm probably doing is making football Twitter go, he's making excuses for him. Okay, well, if you watch that game, you tell me what more he could have done, because he was pressing and he was making the right choices. And I know this is going to sound a bit like Morecambe and Moyes, but it wasn't necessarily in the right order. He was making these runs, he was pressing, and he picked up the ball and controlled it. However, he didn't have Bowen as an outlet to run past him. And he didn't have Benrahma at times around him. And if he was the only one who was willing to gamble. Yeah. And I almost think a confident Benrahma would have been making that run maybe 5 yards earlier, maybe a second or 2 earlier. So he's up with Scamacca to play in. But you've got this system where nobody is on the same wavelength, and the forward is thinking, well, I want people around me and I can only do so much, but we're playing this low block. And the passing was terrible. It was woeful. We had Dawson and Zuma. Zuma, I thought, wasn't bad. I thought he shepherded the game quite well, and he dealt with a lot of what Palace put in front of him.
Also, he was composed when he got the ball. He brought it out. He passed along the floor, whereas let's just go back a second to the goal. Now, everyone knows that I'm not Dawson's biggest fan, but I've praised him to the high heavens as to what he's done for us. But that was one of the things that when I always say that, I always see a ricket in him. I see a problem with him in possession. That was where I highlighted. He didn't really want the ball, and he took no consideration as to the pressure Kehrer could have possibly been in had he received the ball well. Also, it had been raining so much that the surface is obviously slick, things are moving, and he has fired it into him. Now, Kehrer should have left it, granted, but we can't dispute that was bad. And then when the ball came back, he didn't really shepherd or deal with Zaha very well. He dealt with him brilliantly most of the game. But in that sequence, he then just allowed him too much time and space. Every single time today, he was good with him on that. He just completely went. And once he made that mistake, that was it. He couldn't recover. Zuma couldn't get in there either. But again, it would just kind of was a great summary of how we were. We get the ball and the idea is not there. And we are rash. We make a bad choice. We force something that's not there. And then we all turn around and blame each other as to, well, why would you not doing your job? The problem is too many players not doing their jobs. When we do get in possession, quite frankly, in my opinion, players are hiding. There's a lack of movement between the lines and a lack of incisive, quick passing. And when I always say that there's a lack of intensity or there's a lack of intent or positivity, it's not just about just being gung-ho and attack. It's about when you press, you go as a team, not one or two in little kind of units. You go as a team. When you are trying to get back into position, you all run together. It's too much jogging around, getting into positions, into places. One point, Ben Rama was in a left-back position. Rice was in the left-back position. Ben Rama's massively tucked in. Cresswell's halfway down the pitch, and he's just jogging back. Now, we've just lost the ball. We're not playing well. The least you can do as a collective is run and run hard, and we're not doing that. And again, it's such a gap between our centre forward and our midfield, and also teams, and Palace did it all game. They allowed us, or they lulled us in, they set traps so we would pass it to Souček. Once he got there, his natural thing is he doesn't look over his shoulder to see if he can then make it to go on a half turn and then move forward with it. It's, I'm going to lay it back. I'm going to pass it sideways. And the one time he got in a great position, he's clean. He can run with the ball, or he can put it out to the wing where you've got a 2v1. He completely scuffs it with his instep, and it just trickles to Mitchell, who just comes out of his position. And then, not Mitchell, Klein even, collects the ball and goes off on a run. And it's just, again, we are then sitting there going, I think actually that was the moment where Cresswell was jogging back and Ben Rama's burst on past him to get back in position. And Ben Rama was by no means brilliant defensively. There's a couple of moments where he could have done more. But again, when he's in possession, he was far better. But again, I said Ben Rama, but the reason I'm saying Ben Rama is because he did no worse than Bowen.
Yeah. We'll get to the substitution in a minute, I think.
And Ben Rama got called up for his defensive work. Bowen didn't.
I think we'll have to let Ibby take that in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. So like I'm saying, we are disjointed. There is a problem. One of those things, one of the times we actually improved was, we'll talk about the subs in more detail, but the moment we made the subs, one of them I personally don't agree with, the other one I do, we looked so much better because we stepped up the pitch. All of a sudden we were closer to the striker. Again, the striker, that was again, everything seemed to bounce off, but we'll kind of come back. Let's go to Ibby though.
I'll just cut in quickly. Sorry, Ibby, but I'll say as well. I know it's a bit of an easy one to poke the bear, and I think we're at this level where these questions need to be asked. And I said last week, personally, Areola saves that Rashford header. It's not far from him. This week, Fabianski's positioning was awful for the first goal, really awful. The shot isn't it's not particularly great. It's decent, but his positioning is awful. Like it is, for a few goals we've conceded this season, he has moments where he doesn't. He just seems to be lost in the area. And
lost is good way to summarise most of that team at the moment.
I think for me,
lost.
The thing that confuses me as well is that if you took him off last week, and then Areola comes on and doesn't concede in the second half, and then you go out again into Europe, he doesn't concede. Why even risk Fabianski? Because you don't know. He can do all the fitness tests in the world. However, you've got 2 top keepers. Why risk it?
Also, one of the other things is the longevity of that position is Areola. He's our long-term goalkeeper. He's the longevity project, you would say. And yet he is debutising for someone who's been made vice-captain. And before we bring you in, Ibby, I think this is a great point. We just looked like we had no creativity in the game. And part of that is because we can't get the ball through the centre of the pitch. When we get Paqueta in position or when we get Paqueta on the ball, it's largely he's having to fight and scrap on terrible little kind of crumbs and horrible little pieces. A couple of times when he got the ball, he made some nice little passes. But it's few and far between we ever get into a position. And the last time I'm actually going to go in on Souček, because it really annoyed me in the game, got past the ball on the edge of the area. We had players in the box. Instead of trying to put the ball into the area, he plays it across the box and out to the left. And then we don't really do anything. We lose the ball.
I can't.
And another thing was gone. But
I can't remember the last time I saw Souček have a shot, or have a shot and with confidence take another one. You can miss the first one. It's almost a seeker. It's finding your range. Take a second shot at some point in the game. Get yourself there. I don't. In his first season, he would do that all the time, or he would throw himself at something, and we just look completely devoid. He looks crushed as a player, and I obviously we'll get onto the substitutions in a minute, but we'll hand it over to Ibby for his thought on particularly the creativity. Yeah.
So how do you feel about the creativity at the moment, Ibby? What would you think is our problem as you see it?
So poor. I completely agree with what Mike and Sloth were saying, to be fair. And I wanted to sort of pick up on a few of the points that they were making. I don't know if you guys agree, but I thought Crystal Palace used the half spaces so effectively today. I thought West Ham need to make. We need to really take tips off Crystal Palace. I don't think we use the half spaces enough well. It's just that in those little gaps when you can make a little shimmy, you can use a little yard to beat your man. We don't do it well enough. We go back or we stifle ourselves. Souček was a prime example. He was in that sort of half space where Eriksen was, where he played that cross to Rashford against Manchester United, and he was in that half space, and he just does that syndrome he's got at the moment where let me just play it back, and that's sort of the big stifling thing at the moment. As you saw with Czech Decore, he was seeing the lines in between the midfield open up and bursting into the gap and playing a progressive pass into the gap, and you were just seeing them use the space, the half space so effectively. I was thinking to myself during the game, if Crystal Palace had the London Stadium as their home ground with the space and how big the pitch is, I wonder how many home wins they'd get because of how they would utilise and how they play football. And obviously, I'm not saying they're the best team in the world, but I was really impressed the way that they exploited there was no sort of athleticism in the midfield apart from Declan Rice. I thought Souček was blindly just rolling on the floor to try and sort of intercept a pass. I thought Zaha had him on toast. Anytime he faced him up, he couldn't get near him. I felt sorry for Tino Kehrer today, even though I was angry at him at the time, and I think that's just the raw emotion of the game. I looked at his face when he was walking back to the centre circle, and I saw someone who was thinking to himself, okay, I've made a mistake, but it's the people around me who are putting me in these positions. And I thought Craig Dawson's hospital ball to him was so poor. And I saw people getting on Lucas Paqueta's back today. I thought it was a blessing to have him back today. I thought the ball into Scamacca, that beautiful weighted through ball. Obviously, Scamacca can make the pass to Ben Ron, but that's absolutely fine. He had the right idea, he had the right intention. Um, I genuinely thought having Paqueta back today was a big plus, but yet again, we're stifling Paqueta's game. He was
Would you say,
stifled again.
rather than not necessarily he's been stifled, but it's the fact that if you look at Palace and you look at us, today one team had a very clear philosophy, a style of play, not just by style. I mean, there were very distinct patterns that they played. They deliberately targeted players and moved players in which positions to target. They set traps for us in possession, not necessarily that hard, but they set traps for us. And where you looked at us, as we said, it's dysfunctional, it's disjointed. There's no clear view as to when to press. And, when we actually played a bit with the ball, when we actually showed a bit of composure, we made inroads. Because, Palace, as good as they are and as comfortable as they can be as a team, they're not, a team that necessarily with the players that we have, we shouldn't be beaten. Palace played very well. So again, let's get that out there. It's no disrespect to Palace. It's a team that we expect ourselves now to be beating. And in fact, this is the first time I believe we've lost to Palace at London Stadium. So since we've moved, we've not lost to Palace. Today is the first defeat against Palace. So to say it's been coming, that's not even really that true, because Palace have always really struggled when they've come to London Stadium. But today we made it easy. And I think, again, as we saw, they had a very, very clear plan. And they very much understood their roles and what they needed to do. And again, it pains me because Czech Decore, a player, again.
Yeah.
Sloth and I were really kind of campaigning probably for the past 2 years to say that should be at West Ham, along with Rocky, if you follow Rocky as well. Again, it's a player that all three of us talked up as being a brilliant player to come in, and it's another one who was cheap. I would have sold Souček for £20 million and brought in Decore for about 12 to 16 million pounds that they paid for him. Upgrade. It was never a question. It didn't score goals, but everything else about him in possession is quality, like we saw today.
Well,
but
I think,
yeah. Anyway, Ibby, back to you. Kind of, as I say, looking at the patterns of play at Palace, you've already kind of alluded to it. They were much better, and then obviously when you look at us, disjointed.
Yeah, it's so important, and I completely agree with the Czech Decore suggestion. I thought a lot of our fans were calling for a Seko Fofana. But I thought I always preferred Czech Decore to what we needed. Is a solid partner. It's a Declan Rice who has good ball retention. Someone who's going to pick. What I love about Czech Decore is when he sees a little half space, when he drives into the space and he makes a zippy ball into Zaha. He did it a couple of times in the first half, and I was really impressed with that. I thought with us it was a painful watch. It was okay, Fabianski, okay, let's give it to Dawson, Zuma, give it to Rice, arms out. Where is everyone? Anyone coming short? Paqueta comes short, and then we make the wrong pass, and then comes to Dawson and he'll hoof it up, and we're just hoping for a flick on. We're hoping for Scamacca to win that flick on, or we're praying for a second ball, and we didn't win any second balls today, and that was a big problem. And I think that's been a big feature of this season, is a real downfall of us. Is we used to press as the three attacks would go, or the three midfielders would go, but now it's Paqueta going, and then he sort of stops, and then Scamacca goes, and then Rama's looking around, and then Declan Rice just sprints him absolutely nowhere, and he's sort of like saying to everyone, sort of trying to lead by example, and it just doesn't see. We obviously it's obvious to say we're not the same, but we're just not doing the basics right. We're not doing the simple fundamentals that we used to do: chasing, winning second balls, fighting for the ball a bit, and looking like we care, because we don't look like we care at the moment.
I think
I feel.
Sorry, go on, Nick.
Yeah, I just thought, apart from Paqueta, apart from Ben Rama, who again scored a brilliant goal. I don't think he's at his greatest today, but I don't think he was helped by how deep he was sat defensively. I thought it was a great little incisive ball from Paqueta into Ben Rama, and then obviously works out a bit of space and hits a good shot, and it's a great goal. But even when we scored, I did feel like it wasn't deserved. It was against the run of play. But what we don't do enough, we don't take initiative. When we're 1-0 up, take initiative. Right, we're lucky to be in this position. Sort it out. We haven't been good enough. And we did, Mike, you mentioned to me before we started, is Paqueta sort of just bolted straight at Gaeta. And I was thinking, yep, brilliant, right. We sort of got ahead in the game. And then we drift off, we lose concentration. And again, Dawson with a poor ball into Kerr. I feel sorry for Tilo Kerr. Obviously, his touch could have been better. But again, Dawson just stops and lets Zaha have a free shot on goal. And I think the lack of concentration this season as well has been a huge problem. From certain players.
That was really good about one of the things that I was, so eager to kind of praise Kehrer for was he gave us that athleticism up the right hand side, and I thought Cresswell was just really poor today. He, as you said, he'd play a decent pass forward. And, on your little stat board where it says progressive passes, that'll look good because Cresswell will play the most progressive passes. But it was a case of him getting completely and utterly left behind a lot of the time. He would, and what really annoyed me, I don't know how you guys watched the game. I watched it on my stream.
I was there in the stadium.
Yeah,
not happy.
and they had Tony Gale, and they actually brought it back, and they showed Moyes just shouting at Ben Rama, and Ben Rama was getting back, but he'd obviously left room where Cresswell basically had tried to play a ball forward and was jogging back, and he was shouting at Ben Rama to get back, and you think he's not the one you need to be shouting at there. Cresswell gave the ball away a number of times, but also was just jogging back half-heartedly at times. And as we all know, Cresswell can get you a number of assists, and that's fine. Like, if you're scoring and you're winning games, that is amazing. However, he does not have the athleticism to get up and down the pitch that, we saw from Kehrer. And yes, I'm probably going to get comments on this because Kehrer was partly to blame for the goal. But for me, I just looked at Cresswell and I thought, where's your intensity gone? Before the game, I posted in our little group chat, sorry, Ibby, for leaving you out of this. I posted that they're thinking of giving Cresswell a new contract. What the hell has he done to deserve it this season? Yeah, he's been a wonderful servant to the club, but he is left behind by the majority of wide men these days. And if you're going to play him left centre back, that's probably covers a lot of the areas because then you've got an outlet, you've got people who can cover him. But if you're going to play him left back, I'm sorry, he's not good enough. He's not athletic enough. Is probably the better choice of words because he's getting put on toast by a lot of these younger players these days. Anyone with a bit of pace just goes past him like he's not there. And then you get Moyes shouting at Ben Rama to cover. And it's like, it's not his job, mate. That man, the man who's just beaten him is the left back's man. And I thought it was one of the really poor things today.
Yeah, and as you say, with Ben Rama in that case, and even some cases with Bowen, and then I've criticised Bowen's defensive acumen in this game as well, is that you're then lamenting your wingers for not having the defensive nous or being able to prevent essentially what your fullback couldn't prevent. And you're essentially asking your wingers to be better defenders than your fullbacks.
Well, Mitchell for Palace was the great example of what I mean. Kehrer was offering that outlet, and then Mitchell for Palace was just blitzing up and down that side because Kehrer was left. And Bowen was nowhere to be seen. He was not giving him any cover. And if he was, it was half-hearted.
The other thing as well, Palace have Anderson. They have a centre-back who's able to spray passes into those wide areas. So you can have a player like Mitchell who can just essentially ghost up the pitch, because Bowen does tend to switch off, particularly in the last, I'd say, 6 to 8 months. He kind of switches off now, and players seem to drift a lot more on his shoulder than they used to. But, I think we've kind of talked a lot about what the problems are. I think we know what our problems are in some way. And, I think being in the stadium, it was quite, I guess, a bit of civil disobedience by the fans. And I've kind of voiced it like this, it was a bit of a warning shot to Moyes, and the fans voiced their discontent. He first obviously brought the number come up for Benrahma to come off. Now, again, we all know Benrahma wasn't probably having a huge impact after the goal, but then again, having said that, compared to everyone else, where was the impact anywhere else in the pitch?
Yeah,
Moyes also made some comments to the effect that he didn't make much of an impact after the goal. But again, others on the pitch also weren't making an impact. Obviously, we took off Scamacca at half time. Obviously, that kind of a bit like, okay, bit of a. I think that probably threw people a little, because Scamacca, whilst he wasn't amazing, he still was doing what he could do. He couldn't do any more than what he was doing because he had nothing else that he could do with it. So rather than, again, maybe trying Antonio with Scamacca, it's the like-for-like sub, he then took off Benrahma, who was probably the one player that when he did get on the ball, you kind of had a confidence that he might do something. He done something out of nothing. And all of a sudden you're like, that player's already done something out of nothing. And he's got that confidence clearly in those moments, in that final third, where he may do something. And we take him off. The fans boo that. And then on top of that, so first off, that's probably not something that Moyes never would have expected, him making a sub for Benrahma and him getting booed for making that choice. That was then followed up by a round of applause and a cheer for Souček coming off. Now, I'm not one for, I hate ragging on players, and we have done it today. And I hold my hands up saying, yeah, I have done that today. But we cheered one of our own players being substituted. Now, that is partially down to the player's poor performances, but that is also on the manager, that player has been essentially jeered and mocked coming off the pitch, because you have played him consistently out of form when you have options on the bench. You have put that situation, and then after they both come off, there's then a round of Said Benrahma, again, to punctuate the point that the club wants, or the fans are supporting a attacking player and supporting someone that you've taken off who's actually having a good game when you're leaving others on the pitch. I think that was quite a bit of civil disobedience from the fans, and also maybe it was a bit of a warning shot. How did you guys take that particular moment? Because obviously I was in the ground. I don't know where you guys were watching the game, so I don't know how that came across when you saw that moment.
Well, with the Scamacca incident, my dad actually messaged me, because my dad he took one of his clients, and
I hope they're still his client.
I'm not going to touch that. I'm about to say something a bit naughty, but one of his colleagues. There we go. And essentially, what happened? Like, he messaged me and said, "Is Scamacca injured?" And if he is, fair enough. But for me, if you're hooking off your player at half time, you're forward. You've got to have a serious reason. And I mean, I'll be honest here. Antonio was shit when he came on. I thought he was awful. And I've said for a long time that we need a third striker. If you've got that on the bench coming on, you're not going to win any games. I thought he was awful, and particularly with the penalty.
He's been called out for his hold-up play, and saying it's Allaire, and yet, let's be honest, apart from that moment where Antonio, he did not spin Anderson, by the way. No. He was almost falling on his arse, miscontrolling it, overstretching, and Anderson has misread it, rolled under his foot, Antonio burst through, and then dived. Let's have it right. dived because he couldn't control the ball at pace. And if that was Zaha, that's a goal, basically.
Yeah.
But
he also had option to the right hand. He could
have better in 8 acres of space.
But his head is down. His head is down. And this is the problem. You know, if you put him on for the last 10, 20 minutes, amazing. He will run at everything and he will give you that. But you cannot play him for 45 minutes and expect him to change a game that Scamacca can't, because I'm sorry, he's not as good a footballer as Scamacca. And people might go, well, he's West Ham's top scorer. I don't care, because do you know what? If you can give me a season where he scored as many goals as Scamacca in the top flight, then I would say fair enough. He's not done that. The most he's getting was, 12? No, 10. He took a penalty against Norwich where he got a hat-trick to break double figures. And I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Like, you are talking about a player who, if we're going to go up to the top 6, which based on the performances so far this season, we're not, it's not good enough. No other team chasing the top spots takes him in their starting lineup. And to hook your player at half time for him, Scamacca's got to be sitting there thinking, what the hell is going on here? Because I just thought he offered nothing. And when you're in that situation, you either have to bury that chance or you have to play through your teammate. And to just do neither, for me, that is a real red flag.
He miscontrolled it and dived. He overhit it, realised that the ball was going to give. The ball was lost. He threw himself to the floor. He simulated. Lucky not to get a card.
Yeah.
And the only reason he got a penalty really because Manuel Lanzini was apoplectic, just pointing to the spot, pointing to the referee, saying it's a foul, it's a foul, it's a foul. And the ref went with that reaction because the Palace players looked a bit dumbfounded and thought, "Oh, we might be done here." Now VAR got the decision right. Once they replayed it back and you saw it, you go, "Yeah, that's a dive. It's wrong. It's not that." But things are bouncing off Antonio. We're talking about, or people were referring to Scamacca as being Allaire again, and not watching. But
let's put it this: if you're making Allaire and you're making Scamacca the scapegoats to protect Antonio, you've got the wrong end of the argument. And look, I love Antonio. I think he's hilarious because sometimes he is a crap footballer. He is technically a crap footballer. You cannot disagree with that statement. He can do great things, but overall, technically, he is a fart in a hurricane. He's useless. It's one of those things where he will bulldoze through people. He's Adama Traore. He will get away from them. But if you're relying on him to finish, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. And we've seen this over repeated seasons, but people seem to go, but he's our record goal scorer. Yes, because we've had people like Obina and, Shamak in the Premier League. It's one.
Simone Zaza, we also.
We're talking about these substitutions and whether they made an impact. For me, it showed exactly what's wrong, or a large part of what's wrong at the moment, where the changes we made had almost no effect on the game. Downs looked polished when he came on. I think he should have started, to be honest. I think rushing Paqueta back in was a bit... I don't get that. For me, you just play Fornals, or you start Downs and bring Fornals on into the game. But none of the changes had any sort of positive impact. And we talk about Souček. I feel sorry for the guy. I've said it many times. He's a blunt instrument. But the way we're playing is not going to get the best out of that blunt instrument, because you need someone who can deliver. You need someone who can put a ball into the box for him to throw himself at. And we've not got that at the moment. Our wide men are not doing that. Their delivery's simply not good enough. And it almost makes him a dead weight. So Moyes needs to be able to look at that and say, how can I change it? But he didn't. and he didn't do that. He hasn't done that across the whole of the season, and that's why the fans were annoyed today, because it's clear he's part of the problem. And when he was changed, it was almost like a sigh of relief. Mm-hmm. It was, thank God he's seen it.
Yep.
But there was so much of the other decisions from him that just completely hampered us.
Yep.
That I'm sure we'll probably talk about if we're Moyes in and Moyes out. And to be honest, I'm Moyes in. I think it's one of those things where the core group of players is there, and I do think he's earned himself enough time. However, there are decisions that he is making and comments that he is making as well that just don't sit well with me.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at 90 minutes today, and you're saying next week Souček's going to start, you need someone to come and sit with you and say, that's not it. Yeah. You know, something needs to.
I want to give Ibby some time, but just kind of follow that up. Like I say, I think the reaction from fans has been brought about by the consistent playing. It reminds me a lot of when Big Sam kept playing Nolan, when Nolan's form and his ability was waning. You essentially make the fans then resent that player because you are playing them out of form, which is kind of what's happening here with Souček. But Ibby, what were your thoughts on those subs? Do you think it had an impact? Do you think it actually improved anything about us in that game? What were your thoughts when we made those subs? Did you have any sense of we might get something here?
No, I sort of knew. I sort of knew when and this is not me. But look, I think people sort of even on Twitter as well, they get the wrong impression that I just love Benrahma, and I think Benrahma's faultless and he's amazing at everything and he's the best player in the world and he's the next Neymar. He really isn't that. He's not the most perfect footballer. His IQ, he really isn't brilliant. He's a great player on his day. I more like him for the character that he is. He's never complained. He's always got on with it. He's always smiling. He's always happy. He always supports the team. Even when he doesn't start, I think even you might not look into it, but social media, he's always posting. He's always very positive. He's always determined. And the one thing is, even though the manager, and I don't care what anyone says about it, has it in for him, he still does so much to try and impress the manager. You can tell he really wants to have a bond with David Moyes, and that's what he had with Thomas Frank at Brentford. And I think he really he's got a great. You can tell he's got a great rapport with Kevin Nolan and Paul Nevin, because whenever they come off the pitch and he has a good game, they're always lauding him, which is good to see. And he's mentioned it in an interview that he's really close with the coaches. He didn't say manager. He didn't say manager. He said coaches, with the coaches, and that speaks volumes. I thought as soon as he went off and I saw Lanzini coming on, even if I saw Fornals coming on, I would be a bit enthused that Fornals bring a bit of energy, a bit of dynamism. But when I saw Lanzini coming on, I knew sort of there's no sort of directness down the left. And I'm not saying Benrahma was brilliant today, but he's a player, as we saw today. He just needs that little moment, just even a split second, and look, he's put it in the top corner and he's put us 1-0 up. And I might be track back in here, but my biggest frustration this season is we're not taking initiative. We're playing so poorly. We're getting into good positions. We're going 1-0 up or we're drawing a game and we're just not taking initiative of it. It's so frustrating to watch because we basically let the game today just flow by and we just didn't. We were so passive, so slow. Souček was watching the ball go through the lines and just jogging back, and Creswell was jogging. And funny enough, Benrahma actually tracked back in the first half and made a pretty good tackle on, I think, Azayu. But apparently he doesn't track back enough, doesn't do the defensive work, which Fornals gets lauded for.
Scamacca did a bit where he lost the ball, he ran back and made a tackle on the edge of the box. Then it pinballed around and it went away from him. But again, another player who apparently didn't play very well, isn't really moving, isn't offering enough to the team in all aspects, and yet he's making tackles on the edge of his own area and he's our centre forward. But
it's the same thing with Lucas Paqueta as well, the fancy Brazilian who's whenever he gets a sniff of the ball, he's in on it, and he's in on it hard as well. And that's a misconception again. But again, just going back to the substitution, I sort of knew that we weren't going to have any sort of real attacking dynamism going forward. And I'm not saying that Ben Rama was really dynamic today, but I thought he offered that. Palace had something to think about when he had the ball. I thought when Lanzini had the ball, you knew exactly what was going to come deep, and he's great. Lanzini's great at knitting the play. He's brilliant. He's brilliant at coming short, playing it safe. But when we're 1-1 and we need to win a game, we don't need Manuel Lanzini coming on and playing safe.
Hit the head there. If he comes on and he plays it safe, and to go back to another point that Sloth made earlier, the merit system of playing. Fornal's got 2 goals in the last game. Played centrally, was brilliant. Not only does he not start, he doesn't even come on as a sub until Paqueta goes off because he's absolutely, completely and utterly cocked up, kicking it with his right foot, and then kind of hitting himself. But the match wasn't great. It lacked intent. It lacked intensity, and I'm only going to bring this up because Sloth, you kind of raised the point. I don't think any of us here are directly Moyes out at this point. So let's be clear, not Moyes out at this point, but with everything, there's always a breaking point. And, one of the comments here, is, again, when we're talking around, well, who do we go to? Who do we look at? And we say there aren't any managers. It's a very small pool of managers we can go for now if we are wanting to be at the ambition level that we want to be at, especially when you also look at the likes of, say, Villa, who got Unai Emery, for instance, again. So that sets a bar, because if our bar is above theirs, then we need to be arguably looking at managers either above that or ones that could take you to that, because it's a smart, intelligent appointment. I think it's Postecoglou. He's doing fantastic work at Celtic. Some of the football they play is great. I know people will say it's the Scottish League, but you need to look at the patterns of play to understand that, though, yes, it's that league, but he's absolutely changed that team. And the reason they struggled because it was such a departure from what they've played. It's high intensity, high work rate. It's something similar to what we see with Graham Potter had at Brighton. It's very similar to that. And, again, we are, and I imagine there will now be maybe some conversations internally at West Ham based on the fans' little act of civil disobedience towards Moyes, because that was a warning shot. Moyes now saying we have to win our next 2 games, which is the game against Blackburn and the game against Leicester, would also suggest he is under pressure. Let's not forget he spent 180 million. And
sorry, Mike. What a revelation that was! What a revelation that was, by the way. To state that we need to win the next 2 games, like it wasn't already obvious that we need to win the next 2 games. I mean, sorry, I really want to get this off my chest about David Moyes.
Go ahead,
recently,
man.
I thought recently, I feel like his comments have been really, really worrying for the future in terms of. So, for example, Jared Bowen this season, he hasn't been nowhere near the level. He hasn't looked close to getting back to the levels that he was. But Moyes keeps suggesting that I'm seeing Jared getting back to levels. I'm seeing Thomas get back to levels. But then when it comes to obviously people like Ben Rama's the stick out example of today's comments after the game. Apart from the goal, he didn't really impact the game, and it's just little digs like that. And even I remember at the start of the season as well, I think Ben Rama scored. Forgot who he was against, and sort of I think one of the press reporters questioned him, saying that are you happy with the performance? And he sort of patronizingly smiled and looked around and said, well, that's what he has to do. I mean,
well, it's even the comment about his lack of English when talking about the likes of Skamaka.
Oh, yeah.
And then pulls him in. Rather than he could have been nameless. He didn't have to name him, but he deliberately named him. It's those kind of things that point to a manager consistently bringing a player in to make an example. Like today with he didn't make an impact. There's a way you can word that where you are saying that he didn't make an impact, but there's a way that you can word that to try and generate a level of positivity, such as scored a great goal, but then as a team, as a collective, we didn't do enough to enable him to impact the game further. Something like that, because then it's you're putting the importance and you're putting the it back on the team. And I think there's been too much as singling out particular players. And, you know, another one here from Archie talking about the other couple of managers we can go to, but in a very valid point as to, you know, after spending 150 million on this group of players, you know, who's it best to other than Moyes? Now, I personally think the players that we have in many ways suits a manager who does want to play possession football, but there are some bravery issues such as switching to either putting Downs in the middle and allowing Rice and Paqueta to sit together, or even putting Fornals in there and Rice in the centre. You know, we called it out a little while ago saying that we have one of the world's best defensive midfielders, and we're asking him to try and be a great number 8. At the moment, he's not the world's best number 8 or world beater as being a number 8, but he is as a 6. We're asking him to be an 8.
I'm going to quickly mention something as well, because Ibby made a good point about finding the form and what is he seeing. Now, I really questioned over the summer, and it got to that point where, you know, now it's a bit of a joke. However, Moyes' top target was Lingard. He was prepared to wait for Lingard for the whole of the summer. He was prepared to take a player who had no pre-season, who was just pissing about in Dubai with TikTok and whatever he was doing, fair play, you know, he earned his move to not Forest, and it's gone terribly. I'm very happy for it. But the thing that worries me is that he's prepared to wait for that player. Now, he's prepared to wait for someone who is pissing about on social media, yet he's directly calling out Ben Rama and saying, I don't think he had a big impact. Well, he got a goal. That's pretty much the biggest impact you can have on a match, apart from an own goal. And you could have worded your criticism of him far better. You could have said, I thought he showed flashes of what he's capable of today. Or I think, you know, he showed a little bit of it.
Yeah, and as I said, he's also putting it down as a collective problem as to not getting the best out of him.
But the decision making and being prepared to wait for someone like Lingard baffles me, because you're now going into a season where, let's be real about this, he doesn't really like Ben Rama. That's not really been a secret. Even X mentioned that, you know, he's not Moyes' choice. However, how is this possibly seen as what you do? You know, I don't particularly like you, but fair enough. It's like every freaking Rocky film. Like, you know, we're going to get the best performance from Rocky, or we're going to get the best performance out of the other boxer. What are we going to do? Find a way to bloody well get the performance out of him, but don't just keep beating him into the ground and then thinking, why isn't this guy putting up a fight? Why isn't he doing it? Where's the 10 out of 10 performance gone? There's a real issue with the man management that I think people aren't really talking about.
It's very old school man management
as well. We're hiding around this issue, but we're prepared to make Dawson stay at a place where he doesn't really want to stay when there were better options out there. And I mean that with no disrespect to Dawson. We were prepared to make him stay when he didn't want to be here, instead of actually going, Dawson, you've been a fantastic servant for us. If you want to go, you've earned it. Get it sorted. Get it sorted early in the window.
I wasn't going to say this, but you've now made me say it. We could have sold him for £5 million, and we could have bought in a player for £5 million who's absolutely killing it in the Championship.
Yeah.
That I've talked about for the past 3 to 4 years. Player that we talked about right in the summer, saying, yes, he's been at Bordeaux. Yes, Bordeaux didn't play well, but he was one of the standout players. Yes, he's come from Malmo, but he will be quality in the Premier League, and he is smashing it in the Championship and proving without a shadow of a doubt at 6'5", 24, I think he is now.
Homegrown.
This was they need and a homegrown status player. Also brilliant ball player.
Yep.
Let's not forget that Champions League experience as well. And we said, you know what, that young 24-year-old for £5 million who's got homegrown status could be a really good player for the future. We'll ignore that. and will try and convince a player who doesn't want to be here. Now, again, this is not me having a go at Dawson saying we should have sold him because I don't like him. This is because this is a player fundamentally didn't want to be here for family reasons, and we've forced him to stay, and we've then gone, we can't find other options.
Yeah.
Zagadou, almost fair enough, bad injury history, option on a free. Anil Ahmedhovic, 5 million quid, absolute powerhouse, 6'5", everything that Moyes would want in a defender, we just completely ignored because he's at Malmo and then at relegated Bordeaux. But that player was the player that is the one you can build a team or bring into a team over a time, and that's your development project. We talked about Red Bull model. That's a Red Bull model signing.
Yeah.
Red Bull is bollocks when it comes to West Ham. It was talked about. It was absolute bullshit. Said it at the time, and it's just not been fruition. I wasn't getting back to do it.
We're talking about the caliber of players that we brought in, and some of the errors in the transfer market in terms of the judgment that's been made. Now, Postecoglou, I think, is a great manager. I think getting him in would be a mistake, though, and I don't mean that with any disrespect to him. I think the players you've got in now will expect someone bigger, and they won't put up with Postecoglou coming in. Someone like Paqueta, I'm not saying for any second that he's got a bad attitude or anything like that. Even Rice, if you're Declan Rice and you're looking at where we are in the table now, and you're looking at names who could come in and replace David Moyes, you're not going to look at Postecoglou and say, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stay for the rest of the season. He probably is, because Declan is a great lad. However, if you're looking at the replacements and Postecoglou is lined up, you're going to go, I want out in the summer. Like, I want to go to a team who are pushing. Now, again, I'm not Moyes out. However, I think if you're going to sack him, you need to make sure you're getting in a top manager who all of those players, Paqueta, Scamacca, Fornals, Rice, Aguerd, Areola, they're all going to look at and go, that's a good appointment.
I think the sticking point in all this, and we'll end it here because we've come to about an hour now, and I think it's probably time to end. But what I will say is that the sticking point in all of this, in any decision that comes with Moyes, is nothing's going to happen at least until January. And the reason I say it won't happen until January is because our sporting director does not start at West Ham until January. He has involvement in all of those footballing decisions. He will be involved in finding new managers and so on. Technically speaking, if he's doing the sporting director role officially and properly, he's going to be involved in that kind of thing, and he's going to be a big advocate for
if the Czech owner, who, let's face it, he bankrolled the summer, if he wants him out, or if he thinks I'm not getting value for money from him, he's probably going to make that decision.
Yeah.
So
involved based on what was said previously. I think it was the manager who went to went to Slavia. He wasn't impressed with him in an interview. He's asking what his football style was, going into all these details about how he's going to play, and didn't like what he was saying. Just didn't employ him. So he will be fairly thorough. But I think, one of the sticking points is that one of the decision makers, so to speak, during this season, it doesn't actually start until January. He's probably going to be involved before, but truth of the matter is, probably won't make a decision, and probably until actually after the transfer window is my feeling. I think we are coming to a tipping point. The board can sell the club next season. So let's face it, they are not going to want to jeopardize their potential paycheck with a team that is going to get relegated. I don't think we will get relegated. There is enough in our team not to. But the fact of the matter is, the way we are playing is abject. It is completely incompetent at times. It is lacking any intensity, lacking any intent. And it is, at this point, pretty dour. And it's a bit of a reflection of Moyes' attitude to some at times, in that it is a bit reserved, it's a bit dour, and sometimes lacking a bit of imagination. I do like Moyes for what he's done for the club, but that isn't a way. That isn't the kind of a way of allowing him to omit the form we've had in the last year. If you take away the European competitions, our form has been abysmal. And yes, there are some caveats to that, but we also have to remember our bread and butter is the Premier League, not European competitions. And if we want European competitions to continue, the league needs to improve, or we have to win a cup. At the moment, neither of them look like they're potentially going to be going in the way that we hope. But look, it hasn't been the most positive one today.
And if you actually look at context as well, if you actually look at the context as well of the form. Sorry to interrupt you, Mike.
No, go ahead.
10 wins in the Premier League in 2022. I mean, that's generally just not good enough. And I feel like I just want to give my little point on David Moyes as sort of like an overview now. Obviously, we're coming to the end. We are reaching a tipping point, and I feel like you mentioned about sort of obviously certain players being dug out, certain players just being protected at all costs. Now that's part of this food chain where he's at the moment he's on a one-way road to being sacked. He's going to be sacked because of his blind loyalty to players. That is what is going to end up. That's going to be the reason why he gets sacked, is because of his blind loyalty, and he's so loyal. He's so stubborn in his ways. He's always been like that. He's always been like that. He's on stubborn ways. That will get him sacked because the group of players that he's got now.
Yeah.
It's going to lose the group of players that he's got now. The group of players that he's got now, they can't carry on in this way, and you can see certain players already getting frustrated, and I can see sort of a bit of a demise happening at the moment, which is sad to see. But it looks like if it carries on, and if he eradicates his stubbornness, which I don't think he will, I do believe that he will, because of his pure stubbornness and blind loyalty to his philosophies and players.
Yep. And I think that's a great point to end on there. Ibby, thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And sorry we didn't give you as much time as we probably should have. We both went on a bit of a rant.
It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, hopefully we tried to be balanced today. Hopefully we weren't too negative. As we say, the team today was really poor. It was abject. That's the best way I can put it. And we're not Moyes out. But the tipping point is coming, as Ibby so perfectly put it. We are at that tipping point. Whether the board see it that way is another question, but I think the fans are starting to get to that tipping point. But we've got 2 more games left at home. Hopefully there will be 2 more wins, and we can at least go into the World Cup break with a little bit of positivity. Right now, that positivity is not there. But let's, hope that we kind of go into that Blackburn game, bit of positivity, take the game to them and come through that round. And then we follow that up with a good positive performance against Leicester and hopefully 3 points. So we're going to leave it there. We'll hopefully have some better ones and some better times as the season progresses, which I'm sure we will. But there's one more thing left to do. And that is the customary, come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons.
Come on, you Irons.